Her name was Jenna Burling. She was 22 years old, a student, an activist, a person who couldn't ignore other people's pain. Have you ever known people like that? People who help others simply because they can't do otherwise? That's what Jenna was like. She studied film and media arts at Temple University, but her real passion was people. She fought for women's rights, helped the homeless in Philadelphia, and was genuinely involved in the life of her city and community. Friends and family knew her as someone who felt things profoundly, a young woman who dedicated her time to causes larger than herself, from advocating for women's rights to volunteering with organizations that served Philadelphia's homeless population. Her empathy was her defining characteristic. It was the lens through which she viewed everything. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What city are you in? And what's the time and weather like where you are right now? It's always interesting to hear how this story reaches people all over the world. I'm really happy you're here with me. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new stories. The last week of August 2017 was electric, with the promise of a new semester. For Jenna, who had just transferred to Temple's main campus, it was a time of fresh starts and new possibilities. On the evening of Wednesday, August 30th, after a night of socializing with friends and a successful open mic performance, Jenna decided to continue the night. She made her way to Pub Web, a popular, dimly lit tavern on Cecil B. Moore Avenue that was a familiar hub for students. The air inside was thick with the usual mix of cheap beer, loud music, and the excited chatter of a new school year kicking off. It was in this crowded, noisy bar that her path crossed with Joshua Hupperters. At 29, he was several years older than the typical undergraduate crowd. He had been a student at Temple himself, studying marketing, but had since left the university. He was a familiar face in the local bar scene, a man who, on the surface, seemed to blend into the periphery of campus life. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin, Jenna and Hupperters were seen talking. To any casual observer, it was just another late-night conversation, a common sight in any college bar. By 2 a.m., the bar was closing, and patrons spilled out onto the street. A short time later, at approximately 2:06 a.m., a security camera mounted nearby captured a grainy, silent image that would soon become the cornerstone of a desperate search. The footage showed Jenna Burling walking away from the bar, side by side with Joshua Hupperters, heading down North 16th Street. It was the last time anyone would see her alive. Just a few blocks from the bright lights and lingering noise of Pub Web, the residential buildings on North 16th Street were settling into the pre-dawn quiet. But inside Joshua Hupperters' ground floor apartment, a different, terrifying reality was unfolding. What began as a consensual encounter took a dark and violent turn. According to prosecutors, when Jenna refused to engage in a specific sex act, Hupperters' demeanor shifted from amicable to brutally aggressive. At approximately 4 a.m., the silence of the building was shattered. A neighbor, startled awake, heard sounds so disturbing they couldn't be ignored. There were loud thuds, the crash of things being thrown or knocked over, and then, piercing through the walls, came the unmistakable sound of a woman screaming in terror. The neighbor described it as a series of high-pitched, desperate cries, punctuated by a deeper, male voice. It was a sound of pure panic, a struggle that was violent and prolonged. Fearing the worst, the neighbor did exactly what they were supposed to do. They called 911. They reported the terrifying commotion, the sounds of a violent fight, and the screams coming from the apartment below. The call was dispatched, and soon, Philadelphia police officers arrived at the North 16th Street apartment building. They were now just a few feet away from where Jenna Burling was fighting for her life. But the screams had stopped. The building had fallen silent again. The officers stood outside the apartment, listening. Hearing nothing further, and with no answer at the door, they concluded their investigation and left the scene. They were unaware that behind that closed door, Jenna Burling was dead or dying. The chance to intervene, prompted by a neighbor's fearful call, had passed. The apartment, now a silent tomb, held its grim secret, and the man inside was no longer a host, but a killer faced with the problem of what to do with his victim's body. Thursday, August 31st, dawned with an unnerving silence for the Burley family. Jenna was known for being in constant contact. A text, a quick call. She was reliable. But as the morning turned to afternoon, her phone remained stubbornly quiet. Calls went straight to voicemail, and a growing unease began to creep into the day. Her friends on campus hadn't seen or heard from her either, a strange and unsettling fact for a group that was typically in close communication. For her father, Ed Burley, the silence was particularly sharp. He had just seen his daughter the day before. He'd dropped her off at her sister's house, a routine, happy moment that was now frozen in his memory. As the hours ticked by, his paternal instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a dead phone battery. This was out of character. This wasn't Jenna. By evening, the gnawing worry had morphed into outright fear. The time for waiting and hoping for a simple explanation had passed. Ed Burley made the call that every parent dreads. He contacted the Lower Salford Township Police Department in their hometown to officially report his 22-year-old daughter missing.
Temple University police need your help to track down a missing student. They say 22-year-old Jenna Burley was last seen near the bar Pub Web on the 1500 block of Cecil B. Moore Avenue right around 2 o'clock Thursday morning. If you have any information, please give Temple Police a call.
The report immediately triggered a multi-agency response. Lower Salford Police quickly looped in the Temple University Police Department, as Jenna was last known to be near campus. An official missing person investigation was launched. Her name, her face, and a description of what she was wearing began to circulate. The private, agonizing fear of a family had now become a public, urgent search. While her loved ones prayed for her safe return, investigators began the painstaking work of retracing the final hours of a young woman who had seemingly vanished into thin air. The investigation begins, a trail of digital clues. With Jenna Burley officially registered as a missing person, the investigation began with a pressing urgency. Detectives with Temple University Police started where her trail went cold. Pub Web. In modern policing, the first witnesses are often silent, electronic eyes. Investigators began the methodical process of collecting and scrutinizing hours of surveillance footage from the bar and surrounding businesses, looking for any digital breadcrumbs that could point them in the right direction. It didn't take long to find her. On a camera positioned with a clear view of the street, they saw the image that confirmed her family's worst fears. There was Jenna at 2:06 a.m., walking away from the bar's entrance. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man they would soon identify as 29-year-old Joshua Hupperters. He was now their primary person of interest, the last known individual to have been with Jenna. Armed with his identity and address, investigators made their way to his apartment on North 16th Street, the very same apartment where a neighbor had reported terrifying screams just hours earlier. When they arrived, they found Hupperters at home. By this point, he had already spent hours trying to erase the evidence of his horrific crime. He had frantically used cleaning supplies to wipe away bloodstains and had attempted to mask the lingering odor of bleach. When questioned, Hupperters was evasive. He told the officers that he had been so drunk he couldn't remember who he had left the bar with, claiming to have woken up alone. His story was a transparent lie, but without probable cause to enter his home, the officers' hands were tied. However, they saw enough to deepen their suspicions. As they spoke to him, they could see what appeared to be scratches on his face and neck, and they noticed he had a cut on his hand. Hupperters left the conversation and returned with bandages on his hand, a clumsy attempt at concealment that only heightened the investigators' interest. They may have left his doorstep that day without making an arrest, but they now had a prime suspect and a location of intense focus. Joshua Hupperters was no longer just a person of interest. He was the center of their investigation. The brief encounter with police on his doorstep had sent Joshua Hupperters into a state of heightened panic. He knew the investigators were suspicious, and it was only a matter of time before they returned with a warrant. The scratches on his neck were a damning physical record of Jenna's final struggle, and the apartment, despite his frantic cleaning efforts, was still a compromised crime scene. His primary objective became singular and urgent. He had to get Jenna's body out of the apartment. Hupperters went to a nearby store and purchased a large blue plastic storage bin. Back in his apartment, he forced Jenna's body inside, contorting her into the cramped container. The bin was now impossibly heavy, a dead weight he could not move on his own. He needed help, and he turned to his own family for it. He called his cousin, 28-year-old Eric Carlson, and fed him a fabricated story. He claimed he was being evicted and needed immediate help moving his belongings out of the apartment. When Carlson arrived, Hupperter's was ready. He pointed to the large blue bin, explaining that it was full of clothes and personal items. Together, the two men struggled with the immense weight of the container, loading it into a vehicle. Carlson, completely unaware of the horrifying truth of what he was handling, was simply doing a favor for a family member he thought was in a bind. Their destination was not a storage unit, but the suburban quiet of Jenkintown, just outside Philadelphia. There, they unloaded the bin and placed it inside the garage of Hupperter's mother's home. For the moment, the primary piece of evidence was hidden, miles away from the North 16th Street apartment that police were now closing in on. But Hupperter's knew this was only a temporary solution. He had successfully moved the problem, but he had also widened the circle of his crime, leaving a trail that stretched from the city to the suburbs, with his own mother's home now entangled in his desperate and calculated cover-up. The garage in Jenkintown offered only a brief respite for Joshua Hupperter's. He knew it was a dangerously temporary hiding place. His mother could discover the bin at any moment, and the police investigation was intensifying with each passing hour. In the panicked calculus of a murderer trying to outrun his crime, he decided he needed more distance, a place far more remote where his secret could be buried for good. His mind settled on a familiar location, his grandmother's property in Paupack Township, a secluded spot nestled deep in the Poconos of Wayne County, over 100 miles away. In what would become one of the most chilling and audacious details of the case, Hupperter's summoned a ride-sharing service to transport his grisly cargo. A Lyft driver arrived, an unwitting accomplice in the final leg of a horrifying journey.
New details tonight in the murder of Temple student Jenna Burley. Officials have confirmed she was beaten and strangled to death. And we've also learned that the suspect may have used a popular ride-share service to move her body. Sunday night, Sarah's off on Walter Perez. The big story in Action News is disturbing new information in the murder of 22-year-old Jenna Burley. The case continues to unfold, and there are still lingering questions about details involving her murder. But tonight, we know more about how she died and what her accused killer may have done to cover up his actions. Action News reporter Annie McCormick is live at police headquarters with details. Annie.
And Walter, the suspect is charged with murder and is in jail. New details continue to emerge in this complex investigation. Just this weekend, Police Commissioner Ross saying that they're still looking in to see if other people were involved. 29-year-old Joshua Hupperter is charged with murder by Philadelphia police Sunday morning in the death of 22-year-old Temple student Jenna Burley. Investigators discovered Burley's body Saturday afternoon on Hupperter's grandmother's property in Paupack Township, Wayne County, outside Scranton, after state police located and arrested the 29-year-old there Friday afternoon. This morning, the Wayne County coroner announced Burley died from blunt trauma and strangulation. Police believe Hupperter, a former Temple student, killed the victim at his off-campus apartment in the 1700 block of North 16th Street. Sources say his roommate told police he came home to find cleaning products and it appeared someone tried to clean up blood.
We still have a lot of work to do, to include trying to figure out who else may have been involved.
Police executed a search warrant at Hupperter's apartment with a cadaver dog. The video shows the same investigators searching this residence in the 800 block of Cloverly Lane in Jenkintown. Police sources say Hupperter's transported Burley's body from Philadelphia to Jenkintown, then Wayne County. He allegedly used a vehicle operated by popular ride-sharing app Lyft for a portion or all of the trip. Only Action News was there when investigators processed a vehicle with a Lyft sticker late Saturday afternoon at police headquarters. Lyft tonight released a statement saying the allegations are devastating. We stand ready to work with the authorities in their investigation. Burley's family reported her missing Thursday after she stopped communication and missed class. This is one of the last images of Burley taken just after 2 a.m. Thursday at Pub Web, an off-campus bar near Hupperter's apartment. Police have video of the two and believe it's the first time they met. Burley had just started at Temple. A longtime neighbor of the Harleysville native says she was always looking out for others.
She was a great person, always happy, always energetic. She would advocate for absolutely any cause, LGBT, anything you could think of. She was all about equality.
And the suspect faces even more charges than murder, including abuse of a corpse and also drug offenses after a large amount of drugs and cash were reportedly found inside of his apartment during the search. Court records also show he has a lengthy rap sheet in other areas of the state, ranging from a DUI to burglary. For now, reporting live in front of police headquarters, Annie McCormick, Channel 6 Action News. Walter, back to you.
Such a tragic story. Thank you.
Hooperturds loaded the heavy blue storage bin into the car, and for the next 2 hours, the driver transported a murderer and his victim across the state of Pennsylvania, completely unaware of the crime that was sealed in the plastic container just feet away. Upon arriving at the rural property, Hupperturds moved the bin into a small, nondescript shed. In the quiet solitude of the Poconos, surrounded by woods, he must have felt a flicker of relief. He had moved the evidence from his apartment, out of his mother's garage, and to a place where he believed no one would ever think to look. He had covered his tracks. But he had underestimated the investigators. As they pieced together his movements and interviewed those he had contacted, the trail inevitably led them north. Acting on information that pointed them toward the family property, Pennsylvania State Police were dispatched to Wayne County. On Saturday, September 2nd, 2 days after Jenna was murdered, troopers arrived at the quiet Powpack home. They began to search the grounds. It wasn't long before they approached the shed. Inside, they found it, the large blue storage bin. When they lifted the lid, the desperate search for Jenna Burley came to its tragic and horrifying end. Her body, wrapped in a sheet, was inside. The cover-up was over.
Breaking tonight at 6, police in Philadelphia are trying to determine what happened to Jenna Burley, a Temple student missing since Thursday and now feared dead. Good evening. I'm Joe Holden. Natasha Brown is off tonight. Now, the investigation of missing Temple University student Jenna Burley has intensified. Police tell us they have discovered human remains in Honesdale, Wayne County, though they have not confirmed that the remains belong to Burley. However, here is the breaking development. Burley's father wrote in a Facebook post just moments ago that his daughter is, quote, in heaven. Eyewitness News reporter Cleve Bryan spoke with Jenna's father, who confirmed that she is dead. Cleve is live in North Philadelphia with the latest on this breaking story. Cleve, good evening.
Good evening, Joe. I talked to the father this morning just very, very briefly. We touched base later this afternoon after that post, and he did confirm to me what was in that post, saying that his daughter has passed away. Now, we are waiting for confirmation from Philadelphia police. They say they may have a press conference this evening where they'll be able to give us many more details. Meanwhile, we've been at this scene all day here on North 16th Street, where they were looking for some clues. It's been a very busy day for police here.
Removing evidence from an off-campus apartment and sorting through trash on the curb, Philadelphia police are keyed in on the 1700 block of North 16th Street in North Philly, looking for clues in the disappearance of 22-year-old Temple student Jenna Burley.
I'm just, a little scared, only because I'm like right next door.
I'm scared. It could have probably been me, you never know.
Naomi Molina lives in the third-floor apartment in building 1708. She says officers were in and out of the first-floor apartment.
I left yesterday, and the cops and detectives were downstairs.
Police say they're questioning the man who lives there, who's friends with Burley. On and near campus, Burley's disappearance has been the main topic of conversation since her sister Janelle posted a plea for help to find Jenna. She says the last time anyone saw her sister was when she left Pub Web around 2 a.m. on Thursday. Late Saturday afternoon, Ed Burley announced his daughter Jenna's death on Facebook and confirmed her passing to me on the phone.
Our prayers go out to her and to her family.
Again, this is a very active investigation. We're trying to find out what connections they are between this scene and what state police found out in the central part of the state. And again, hoping to get some more information from Philadelphia police tonight. They said that they may do a press conference shortly. Live in North Philly, Cleve Bryan, CBS 3.
With the discovery of Jenna's body in the Powpack shed, the investigation snapped into its final phase. The search was over. Joshua Hupperters was swiftly taken into custody, his desperate cross-state effort to hide his crime having crumbled around him. Faced with the undeniable evidence that authorities had found his victim, his strategy shifted from evasion to damage control. He was cornered, and complete denial was no longer an option. During questioning, Hupperters made a calculated admission. He confessed to parts of the crime, the parts that were now impossible to deny. He admitted to putting Jenna's body in the storage bin and to transporting it from Philadelphia to his grandmother's property. In legal terms, he confessed to abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence. He was, in effect, admitting to the ghoulish aftermath. But on the central, most critical charge murder, he was steadfast in his denial. To explain the horrific events, he constructed a new narrative, one designed to deflect all blame for Jenna's death onto another person. He painted a picture of himself not as a killer, but as a terrified bystander who had made a series of panicked, terrible decisions. The true murderer, he claimed, was his roommate, Jack Miley. Hupperters' story was that he had passed out and woken up to find Jenna's body in his apartment, allegedly killed by Miley during a violent dispute. He claimed his only crime was panicking and trying to hide the body to protect his roommate. To investigators and prosecutors, the story was transparently false. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort of a guilty man. There was no evidence tying Jack Miley to the crime. All the evidence pointed directly and exclusively at Hupperters. The surveillance footage of him leaving with Jenna, the screams from his apartment, the fresh scratches on his neck and hands from her final struggle, and his own elaborate multi-stage effort to conceal the body. His attempt to frame his roommate was immediately dismissed by law enforcement as a baseless lie. The battle lines for trial were now clearly drawn. Hupperters had admitted to being the architect of the cover-up, but he had invented a phantom killer for the murder itself. It would be up to a jury to see through the deception. In January 2019, nearly a year and a half after Jenna Burley's death, the trial of Joshua Hupperters began in a Philadelphia courtroom. The case had captured the city's attention, a chilling story of a vibrant young woman's life violently extinguished at the start of a promising new chapter. As the jury was seated, the room settled into a tense silence, ready to hear two profoundly different accounts of what happened inside the North 16th Street apartment. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Jason Grinnell, began their opening statement with a clear and brutal narrative. They painted a picture of a night that began consensually but ended in a fit of savage rage. According to the prosecution, when Jenna refused Hupperters' demand for a specific sexual act, he exploded. What followed was not a simple argument, but a vicious, one-sided assault. They argued that this was not a panic-induced accident, but a conscious act of murder, fueled by rejection and a need for violent control. Then, it was the defense's turn. Attorney David Nenner stood before the jury and offered a completely different reality. He conceded the horrific nature of the crime and the gruesome details of the cover-up, but he insisted his client, Joshua Hupperters, was not the killer. Nenner doubled down on the story Hupperters had concocted since his arrest, that the true murderer was his roommate, Jack Miley. The defense argued that Hupperters had been a passive, perhaps intoxicated bystander who had fallen asleep only to wake up to the nightmare of Jenna's body in his living room. His subsequent actions, hiding the body, lying to police, and embarking on a desperate trip to the Poconos, were framed not as the calculated moves of a killer, but as the panicked, foolish decisions of an innocent man trying to protect his roommate. The jury was now faced with two irreconcilable tales. One was a story of rage and murder, with the defendant at its center. The other was a story of a phantom killer, a narrative that conveniently absolved the defendant of the ultimate crime while admitting to all the ghoulish acts that followed. As the trial prepared to move into its next phase, the central question was clear. Could the defense create enough doubt to save their client, or would the weight of the forensic evidence tell a story so clear and convincing that no alternate reality could possibly stand? As the trial unfolded, the prosecution began to systematically dismantle the defense's narrative, replacing fiction with a mountain of irrefutable fact. The case against Joshua Hupperters was not built on a single piece of evidence, but on a tightly woven tapestry of forensic science, digital footprints, and damning witness testimony. At the heart of their case was the DNA evidence, which told a silent but powerful story of the final violent moments of Jenna Burley's life. Forensics experts testified that Hupperters's DNA was found on Jenna's body. Even more damning, DNA belonging to Jenna was discovered underneath Hupperters's fingernails. This single piece of evidence was a testament to her struggle. It proved that in her last seconds, she was fighting back, scratching at her attacker and preserving the identity of her killer on his own hands. The scratches that police had observed on his neck and hands were no longer just a point of suspicion. They were now corroborated as wounds from his victim. Next, the medical examiner took the stand, delivering a clinical and chilling account of the sheer brutality of the attack. Dr. Sam Golino testified that Jenna died from a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. He detailed how she had suffered more than 30 separate injuries, including a broken hyoid bone in her neck, a classic sign of manual strangulation. The violence was so severe that it was clear this was no accident, but a sustained and deliberate assault. One by one, witnesses took the stand and sealed the holes in the timeline. The roommate Hupperters tried to frame, Jack Miley, testified that he was not even in the apartment at the time of the murder, providing a solid alibi that completely invalidated the defense's core argument. Hupperters's cousin, Eric Carlson, recounted how he was tricked into helping move the impossibly heavy storage bin, believing he was just helping a relative move some belongings. The Lyft driver described the long, strange ride to the Poconos with a man and his sealed container. Finally, the prosecution called Ed Burley to the stand. The courtroom fell quiet as Jenna's father spoke not of forensics or timelines, but of his daughter. He described her kindness, her passion for helping others, and the deep void her absence had left. He recounted their last conversation, a simple, loving exchange that now hung in the air as a painful reminder of everything that was lost. His emotional testimony brought the case back from the cold, hard facts of the crime to the devastating human cost, reminding the jury that the evidence they were weighing was all that was left of a cherished daughter, sister, and friend. After weeks of harrowing testimony and grim evidence, the case was finally in the hands of the jury. They were tasked with seeing through the defense's desperate, baseless attempt to pin the murder on a phantom killer. The weight of the evidence, the DNA, the medical examiner's findings, the testimony of witnesses, and Hupperters's own damning actions was overwhelming. The jury's deliberation was not long. They returned to the courtroom with a verdict that affirmed the prosecution's narrative. Joshua Hupperters was guilty. He was convicted on all counts, including first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. At his sentencing hearing, the judge condemned the crime in the strongest possible terms, calling the murder outrageous and brutal. There would be no leniency. Joshua Hupperters was sentenced to the mandatory term for first-degree murder, life in prison without the possibility of parole. For his other crimes, an additional 4.5 to 9 years were added, a symbolic gesture ensuring he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Justice, in the legal sense, had been served. In the wake of the trial, Jenna's family continued their search for accountability. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against PubWeb, arguing that the bar had served both Jenna and Hupperters unreasonable amounts of alcohol that fateful night, contributing to a dangerous situation that ultimately led to her death. But the most powerful response to the hatred that took Jenna's life was not one of anger, but one of profound love. Her family refused to let her story end with an act of violence. To honor the compassionate spirit that had defined her life, they founded a charity called Jenna's Blessing Bags for the Homeless. The initiative was a direct continuation of Jenna's own passion for helping those in need. The bags, filled with essential hygiene products like soap, toothbrushes, and deodorant, are distributed to homeless individuals throughout the Philadelphia area. The project transformed the Burley family's grief into positive action, and the community response was overwhelming. In the years since its creation, the charity has collected and distributed thousands of these bags, providing a small measure of comfort and dignity to those on the streets. Through this simple, powerful act of giving, Jenna Burley's legacy was reclaimed. Joshua Hupperters had tried to erase her, to silence her voice and hide her away in a shed. But he failed. In the end, it is not the darkness of her death that defines her memory, but the enduring light of her kindness, which continues to touch the lives of strangers, carried on by a family determined to ensure their daughter's story would forever be one of love and blessing.